Hey, this is Ryan Smith from Soul Asylum, the Melismatics, and Ryan and Pony, and you are watching Channa 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 podcast.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of my podcast. We have very special guest today joining all the way from Minnesota. We have Ryan Smith joining the podcast. Hi Ryan.
Hello, how are you doing, Channa?
I'm good. How are you this evening? How's the weather like?
You know, we're in the Twin Cities of Minnesota. It gets very cold here. It's not the extreme cold that we're about to experience, but it's getting there. It's getting a little chilly, so I'm keeping toasty warm here. You know, dressing
Right.
in layers.
Okay. So how is Minnesota? Is Minnesota going sort of back to normal now? Or how is it?
Well, you know, our COVID numbers just had a big jump upward. So it's kind of going in some ways back to normal. I mean, I don't, normal is a stretch. I don't think it's normal, but there's live music again. There are
Right.
sporting events again. Different venues have different requirements. Some make you wear masks or prove vaccination. So it's not fully normal, but we're able to do things again. So it's starting to feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Right. Yeah, it gives you hope that you when you can do something. For example, yesterday I was able to watch a movie for the first time after the pandemic. It was
Yeah.
such a great experience for me to go back and like watch a movie. Uh,
Oh, yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, normally is what we make of it now, right? Right.
You're totally right about that. It is whatever you make. You got to appreciate whatever it is that's happening, and there's a certain amount of acceptance you have to have with the
Right.
way things are, and if you don't, I guess if you can live with it, and if you can find the good in it, you'll be all right.
Right. So I know that you recorded the Hurry Up and Wait with Soul Asylum in 2020, and then you were supposed to like tour, and I know that got delayed. So what's going to happen to that tour? Any idea of that will happen now that with things?
You mean like the tour that got delayed?
Right.
So we actually finished that tour. So what happened is it was 2019
Mm,
and the tour was called the Dead Letter Tour. So we had released the first single from the album, which was Dead Letter, and the
right.
album is Rip and Wait, like you said. And it was March of 2019. We were in California. I think the last show we ended up actually playing was in Los Angeles, and we were about to head to San Diego. We made it there, but by the time we got there, the rest of the tour was completely canceled, including South by Southwest in
Right.
Austin, Texas. So all that got canceled. I think that tour was still probably 5 weeks, and it was supposed to have a couple more. Um, then, obviously, yes, the pandemic hit. We were home. We were doing the quarantine sessions. We were working on new music. We did some live streams, but it wasn't until this summer that we
Mm.
got back on the road. So we called that what was the name of that tour? I can't even remember. It was just, this is what's happening to my brain in the pandemic. It was well, we basically completed that tour and it was a 7 week tour
Right.
um, that we did, and so we hit the places I think that we were supposed to, some of them, and then it was a lot of different shows. So before we hit it, get into a bus again, a tour bus, it's probably going to be next summer, but we'll be doing fly dates up until
Right.
then.
Right. Right. So Ryan, how about I'm not really sure if Soul Asylum actually toured Asia. Probably they have. I don't know if they went to Japan or what. Are you aware?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I was with Soul Asylum, we went to Japan, and that was the first time Soul Asylum had been there, I think, since 1995.
Right.
So it was pretty exciting, and you could tell people were waiting, and just everywhere we went, there are people waiting, you know, very politely. They're
Right,
so polite
right.
in Japan. I mean, just utterly, everybody is very exceptionally considerate and just polite and kind. But people would very, you know, quietly wait and, um, you know, ask for autographs or just say something and then leave everybody alone and move on. It was really nice. So, but that's in my experience, that's the only trip to Asia. I don't know beyond that, other than the fact that I know that for sure in, you know, Japan in
Mm.
1995. So I'm not sure. And where are you out of, Channa?
I'm based in Philippines. It's
Oh,
three
okay.
hours from Japan.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Right. So Ryan, you're coming from Minnesota, and I know that like the places like Minneapolis and like it's so musical place, and we got like Prince coming out of there. So tell me a little bit about your childhood growing up, and like what's your earliest memory of music, and what do you remember about the music scene back in the day?
Yeah. Well, I have to say that the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, has been a really incredible place to grow up because, as you said, the music scene here is very incredible.
Mm.
So the first memories I have of music would have been sifting through my dad's vinyl records. And he had classic rock albums. The Beatles really blew my mind. You know, just as when you're a little kid and you find a Beatles record, and I thought they were an obscure artist. I had
Right.
no idea they were the biggest band in the universe. So I thought I found this really amazing buried treasure of this band called the Beatles. But you know, he had records from them. He had Bob Dylan. He had some Rolling Stones. He had some folk, a lot of folk music as well. And I just kind of gravitated towards the stuff I liked, which tended to be the rock and roll, like Kinks and that kind of
Right.
stuff. And I would put on his records on the record player, and I would just basically focus 100% on the music and put the speakers next to each ear, and I would just listen for hours on end. And then I started listening to FM radio, and they had oldies stations where I discovered they were playing the Beatles. And so I would take my boombox with a cassette player, hit record, and do all that kind of stuff. So it didn't take long before I kind of figured out, oh, this is a big band that's very famous, and you know, there's a lot other types of music out there. And you know, being from the Twin Cities, you discover Prince very early, and obviously Prince was very, very popular worldwide. I mean,
Mm.
so I listened to a lot of Prince, and then I got sucked into bands like Husker Du and the Replacements,
Right.
and a lot of the Suburbs, other bands from the Twin Cities that were local heroes. Um, and from there, you know, I got into all kinds of other music, punk rock, post punk, British music in general, the Manchester, like Manchester scene. But all of that were really, like, to me, tied together things that were going on in Minneapolis, because we always had elements of all of that. We had elements of soul music and funk music, and then we had punk rock, Americana, and then you had a lot of that Brit rock kind of filtering in. We had bands like Polera, Landing Gear, other bands that were influenced by a lot of the British music. So anyway, it's a melting pot, and I travel a lot, and I have to always say that the Minneapolis music scene is really one of the best in the world as far as I'm concerned. So
Right. Right. So Ryan, when did you like pick up playing the guitar? I mean, what really like inspired you to pick up the guitar?
well, I think when I was super young, I mean talking like, you know, 3, 4, 5, listening to the Beatles on vinyl. I always had this dream that I would become a musician, and then I completely forgot about it, and I got into science. I wanted to go into electrical engineering. I
Right.
started building robots and electronic things. I got really into that. And then when I was in 6th grade, I actually played trombone in my school band. And
Right.
that blew my mind. that was like, I'm like, this is what I'm gonna do. I've told this story before, but basically when I, the first time I played trombone with our jazz band that was playing, I don't even know, the simplest song, drummers just playing a straight rock beat. I'm just
Mm.
and the rush of adrenaline I got from playing music with other people was so intense. I was smiling. I was grinning so much that I couldn't even play the trombone. I was like, this is the most amazing experience I've ever had. And the rush was, it was like no other. And from then on, I decided, I like science, I like robots, I like all of these other things, but I think I'm going to become a musician for sure. So it was in sixth grade. I really knew I needed to get a guitar. I needed to figure this out.
Right. So you are the second rock artist that told me that you started with the trombone. I had a guest last week from Sweden who said he also started with the trombone.
There must be some connection, with the trombone and people that play guitar. But I don't know you probably would not have any idea that this is the case. But when Soul Asylum did a tour with the English Beat,
Right.
Dave and I would go up, and Dave plays trumpet, and I play, obviously trombone was my first instrument I really played, and I would sit in with them playing trombone, and
Wow, so cool.
I was like, this is so fun. I'm like, this is the most exciting thing ever. It kind of gave me a flashback to my, very excited early days of playing music. It was
Right.
pretty cool. Yeah.
So deciding sixth grade you need to have a guitar, and then from that you had like couple of bands before that. How did it work out? Like, did you play in some bands?
Yeah, it started like I convinced my parents to let me take a crash course in guitar. It was a 1 month program at a local music store, Schmidt Music. And you didn't even get to own the guitar. You got a guitar that was like loaned to you. And the guitar was called the Fender Squire Bullet.
Right.
It's now a well sought after guitar, but at the time it was just like a piece of junk, that it was, you could play. But they built them pretty solid. And now, like I said, people are trying to go and collect those. They only made them for a limited time. But anyway, they taught me how to play power chords and do a few basic things. And I just got so into it. I was obsessed. So every second I had that I wasn't, focused on something else like school or, sports or something, I was 100% into music. And I started writing songs right away. In fact, well, 2 weeks into me even having a guitar in my hand, I booked my first gig, and I joined. So I think I was in, so I guess I would have been in by this time, seventh grade. I'm not exactly sure, but there was a band of seniors in high school. So I'm like in junior high, and I somehow got myself into this band of seniors that were playing like Metallica, Anthrax, basically heavy punk and metal music. And I
Right.
got myself into that band and did my first gig 2 weeks after playing guitar. And we were playing, stuff like For Whom the Bell Tolls and I'm the Man. And, well, and anyway, I was just basically moving around power chords and acting crazy. That was like, I was like, well, I only know a little bit. I know like one scale and some power chords. So, and I can move around a lot and act like I'm nuts. So that was my start. And then from there, I got into just, I was writing music all the time. I started taking tape decks and doing multi-layered recordings where I would, put drums down and then play a keyboard and a guitar. And I started building up tracks. And I made, I think, at a high school band, we made at least, well, a full length album, an EP, and I had made a couple solo albums, still while in high school. And then right out of high school, I knew this is what I'm doing. So
Right.
I really put my head to the grind, or I put my nose to the grindstone, or whatever that expression is. And I just was like, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to work really hard at it.
Yeah, when you say that, uh, which I also say, like, it's not how many chords you know, it's like how you use what you know, right? Like,
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, that's so I also teach music, and I always tell my students, you can do something great with whatever you know. You know,
right,
wherever you're at, if you know one chord, you can write a great song. If you know two chords, you can write a great song. If you know three, if you know a million chords, you can write, a great song too. But you could write a bad song any step of the way. And you can, it's all about creativity and having, heart, following what you hear. That's mostly what it is. It's being adventurous and following creativity more than how many things you know at any given time. But it's also really important to keep trying to push yourself to learn new things,
right.
because then you're growing and your mind is moving. You know, but it doesn't mean you need to wait until you know all the chords and all the
Right,
scales to write music.
right. I think Ryan, a good example is what you mentioned earlier, Beatles, because the Beatles have like songs like Yellow Submarine, like just like songs for like kids, and then they have songs like for the classical. You can consider
Oh
it
yeah.
as a classical masterpiece, and everything in between. So I was so fascinated. I was learning about Beatles in I was doing some music history courses, and I'm like the British invasion, like Beatles and Rolling Stones, right? So I was so amazed with how much like creativity they had, and then they had that mop Beatle stage, and
The
then they
mop
suddenly
top. Yeah.
come up top, and then they abandoned it, and they went on full scale, so sort of a transformation. It's really amazing how Beatles. Uh, have you seen this movie Yesterday? There's a movie called Yesterday about movies about
Yeah,
Beatles.
I actually saw it on a Soul Asylum tour date. It was on a plane, and I was
Right.
like, "Oh, I got to see this because I've heard about it." It's where the Beatles didn't ever exist, right?
Exist.
It's
Yeah.
like an alternate reality, and this one guy remembers all these songs. He's trying to remember them and bring them to everybody. Yeah, it was really really cool concept.
Right. Right. So, when you were like doing these songs and playing in other bands, were you ever aware of Soul Asylum? Were you a fan of the
Oh,
band before?
I absolutely was. Like I said, I mean, being from the Twin Cities, there were certain artists that there's a lot of hometown pride for. You mentioned Prince, The Replacements, Husker Du, The Suburbs. We had a lot of other more locally known bands that maybe everybody else doesn't know, but like the Magnetones were very popular. The Wallets. We had a bunch of these other bands that you're probably like, who's that? I don't know, but it's all right. Here, their hometown. But Soul Asylum was one of the top bands that we had. And when they really broke mainstream with Grave Dancers Union, everybody here was really proud and really just shocked at how our local band somehow now was on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine and on MTV, every hour. It was just like, wow, this is mind blowing. So I was a fan. Yeah, I had a lot of the albums. I didn't have all of them, but I had Say What You Will, the first record. I had
Right.
I digitally had acquired what was on Times Incinerator, and I had Hang Time and The Horse, Made to Be Broken, Grave Dancers Union, Let Your Dim Light Shine. I didn't actually own like Candy from a Stranger, and I didn't have uh boy, I'm having a moment. I can't remember all the names, all the records. Little embarrassing, but there were a few I didn't have. And but even when like Silver Lining came out, I got that record, and I love that album. I think it's like a highly overlooked Soul Asylum album. There's so many good songs on that album.
Right.
So I mean, I've been a fan the whole way through, really. I mean, I've always Dave to me is like one of the ideal songwriters. Like his lyrics are very clever. He always finds interesting ways to say things. You know, he plays on words in ways that crack me up, and I think most people think are funny. You know, it's just he's good with words, and his chord progressions, his melodies are excellent. So I've always just been a fan of the band, period. And
Right.
you know, having like Michael Bland in the band, you know, he's a worldwide legend. And
Right. Right.
yeah, again, being from the Twin Cities, he was a guy that, you know, you knew who he was. He was the drummer. I mean, pretty much. I mean, it was like he was the guy you dreamed like, oh, maybe someday I'll play with Michael Bland. That would be amazing, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's kind of cool. You know, you take that stuff. Sometimes it's easy to not think about it, and it just you take it for granted, like it's just day to day life. But you know, if you look back on it, it's pretty amazing to me to have the opportunity, you know, to make music with people that I really admire like that.
Right. Right. So Ryan, I actually grew up in Sri Lanka. So
Okay.
right. So Soul Asylum, Runaway Train, Black Gold, those songs were like was always playing because for back then it was only radio for us. There was no other way to get music. It was only radio, and those songs were playing over and over in radio, right? So in rock radio, we had like one radio channel for rock. So I really remember that, and I really, fell in love with that song. And then first time saw that music video for Runaway Train. Remember they had a sort of a start of that. They talk about the kids who were like missing or stuff like that, right?
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely.
so it really got connected, and a few years later I got this one which I still have, one of my favorite albums. And I was so surprised it was like just 99 cents. The
Oh, hey,
label.
there. Was it used or new for 99 cents?
I don't know, I think probably used, but
Yeah,
it's a great album.
that's
I really loved it.
yeah.
so so how did this happen that you were able to, like, how you got invited to play for the band?
Well, you know, it was a long time coming, I think. For one, um, I think that, well, Soul Asylum was aware of a band that I've had for many years called the Melismatics.
Right.
And they had asked us to open for them. Um, we had the same producer, John Fields, was working with the Melismatics. So we had this connection there. Um, and you know, my interpretation of it is that they saw what I was doing with that band, and they thought it made a lot of sense that this would work with what they do. And I remember when the Melismatics started at playing at clubs like First Avenue, where Soul Asylum is, you know, played so many times, more times that can be counted. I remember the stage manager at First Avenue is telling me when the Melismatics were a new band, he said, you know, you guys remind me of a young Soul Asylum. Like you hear, he's like, you guys remind me of when the same spirit that they had. Um, and that, I think, you know, this kind of says it all. Like we just had a similar aesthetic and a similar approach to music. The Melismatics went off onto a different tangent. Like when we started, we were more of a guitar rock, you know, heavily influenced by punk music and indie rock. And then we started doing other things. Like we got into doing more electronics in keyboards and stuff that Soul Asylum never did. So we kind of veered another direction. But nonetheless, like I think that it was similar enough in a way where there was this like, a mindset that they thought, you know, there was some kind of connection going on. So, you know, if you ask how did it happen, I mean, basically I started getting emails that were very cryptic. They didn't say a whole lot. It would just be like, would you learn these songs and show up to this rehearsal? And you know, and the way I remembered it, at least, well, actually Michael called me once before to kind of just see if I would even entertain the idea, and I said of course. You know, yeah, absolutely. Why, you know, I feel like I'd be crazy to not do it. And then it was like a series of these emails with no explanation quite, like, you know, why I'm doing this or what the payoff would be or anything, or why, you know, or what they were looking for. But I did a couple, and then they basically, I think it was very fast the way I remember it. Like after one rehearsal, they say, "Can you come back the next day?" I came back the next day. Then they were like, "Can you go to Texas and Philadelphia this weekend?" You know, and I was like, "Sure, I can do that." And it was a kind of a dry run to see how things would go in a show. And we gelled. I felt we gelled right away, and I would say they felt. I mean, I believe the feeling is mutual because I'm still here. You know, we kept going. So you know, it felt really good, and it just felt like, I don't know, the connection I had with Dave and Michael and either Winston or Jeremy, who is a longtime friend of mine too. You know, it just felt right. It felt like this, you know, works, and then that's the rest is what it is, you know.
Right. So Soul Asylum. So they started with. I mean, they had Dan first, and then Shah Bono, and then you came in, right?
Yeah.
So how was it like? You know, you have to play all these songs. Like I know that most of those songs were like probably your favorite songs as well, right? So it was. How was the experience of actually able to play on stage those songs, right? You know.
Yeah, it was, I mean, I would say like doing the audition rehearsal things were very intimidating, you know, because I don't know how to put it other than, you know, if you, it's intimidating because you're playing it with the people that, you know, that recorded the songs and have been playing these songs for a long time, and you want to do more than anything. I just didn't want to let them down. You know, I was like, they need something for some reason, and I don't want to let them down. So, you know, but it was really cool. Um, so intimidating, exciting, nerve wracking, terrifying.
Right. And then you recorded the Hurry Up and Wait, and I love this song. There's a song called Got It Pretty Good, which
Yeah.
is kind of a bluesy but kind of heavy song, and which I really love. How about recording that album? I mean, is that the first album you recorded with Soul Asylum, or were you able to do previously?
That was the first album that I recorded with Soul Asylum. We did an acoustic EP after called Born Free, and then we've been working on newer stuff since then. That it's just in the demoing process at this point. But you know, really right away or real early in the process, we started working on new music. So by the time we made Hurry Up and Wait for real, I had already been going over to Dave's, you know, like all the time. We would go over there and just jam. We would go, a lot of times we would meet at a local pub, you know, and meet there. And then we would go over to his place and we would just jam. And sometimes it'd be like, I'll play drums and he's going to play guitar. Or we would switch it up and he's playing drums. And we would just play and experiment and go through his old songs that he hadn't used or new ones that he was, new ideas, and you know, layering guitar ideas down over songs he had written. That and there's so much of that already that I felt real comfortable with the process before we actually made Hurry Up and Wait. But when it came time to make Hurry Up and Wait, what we really did was we kind of narrowed down a group of songs. We started with, I mean, there were, I remember on my iPod, my old school iPod, I had like 150 songs that we were like considering.
Right.
You know, that was like the pool of songs. And then we had narrowed it down to like 50. And then it came down to 25. And Dave and I started doing some acoustic gigs where it was just he and I playing them acoustically. And the idea was that we would kind of sort through, well, what songs really stick, you know, like which ones, if we play it in front of an audience with just two guitars and two voices, is going to like really capture people's interest. And we ended up recording those 25 songs. So Hurry Up and Wait has a bunch of outtakes. I think I got the number right. I believe we recorded 25 songs for Hurry Up and Wait. And when it came time to do it with the band, we didn't rehearse at all. We just, we were on a plane and we were flying back to from wherever we were coming from. and we got a message saying we're recording. I think we're flying back on a Sunday, and it said we're recording on Tuesday.
Right.
And I remember being like, well, that's interesting. We've never played these songs as a band ever. And the only thing we've done is played them acoustic. So this would be exciting. So we set up and we played a creation studio in Minneapolis, which is where Soul Asylum had made previous albums like Made to Be Broken and some other ones. And we set up and we played every song a maximum of 3 times, maybe one on some of them, 1, 2, 3 tops. And we would just go through a song and everybody would just hyper focus and be like, here we go. We did overdubs. We spent a lot of time working on it. We really put a lot of time into that. So once we got the basic tracks down for the songs, and then it was like more hard work of trying to think through everything, like every guitar part, every harmony, every lead vocal, everything. There was so much thought put into that album. And so it was cool to see the process of starting with, like 150 songs, that the album could have gone anywhere. It could have been an experimental album. It could have been a hardcore punk album. It could have been an acoustic folk album. But to see like what ended up filtering through was really fun to be a part of it, like from the ground up, So yeah, I mean, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. So one thing that I love about like Dave's voice, I think it's kind of like, it's like it defines, like, for example, the 90s, what 90s was like. When I hear his voice, it just brings me to that sort of 1995, 1993, that it's so recognizable, right? I mean, people who listen to his Soul Asylum.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned about Michael Bland, and Michael Bland was actually part of the NPG, right? New Power Generation of Prince, and he recorded Diamonds and Pearls. Wow, that's and then on the other side, he actually played for like Backstreet Boys, Clay Aiken, and all these other Nick Jonas. I think he's part of Nick Jonas' side project as well. I mean, such an amazing drummer, right? Legendary, actually, right?
He's he's brilliant. There's no way around that. He's just, I sometimes pinch myself and I go, I'm playing with these just brilliant musicians. It's the coolest thing ever. Yeah, Michael is great. And he's got lots of stories of playing with Prince. I mean, it's very fun to hear his firsthand experience being in Prince's band and what that was like. And it's probably informed the way that he operates in Soul Asylum, because Michael, in a lot of ways is like the musical director of Soul Asylum. He'll put the set list together. More recently, everybody's been kind of putting in their 2 cents on the set list, like, putting their version of it and filtering it through. But that's kind of been his role, and finding musicians and, I think his experience with Prince really helped him do that to a high level that you could only get from being taught by Prince, like one of the greatest in the history of music. It's like, I mean, I love Prince. I think he put out so much music, and so much of it was brilliant. And of course, not all of it was, but I mean, the amount of stuff that he put out that was incredible is staggering,
And I think he was not afraid to put music out, right? Whether it was like he was just putting it out, and he didn't really care about genres. He didn't like. There's so many different things of what he put out. And then the other thing, Ryan, is the people who he introduced to the scene, right? He has a lot of prodigies. Like, he brought in a lot of musicians to, like, he influenced a lot of musicians, right? He gave chance to a lot of musicians to play with him, and that's another whole story, right?
Yeah. Yes, you're totally right. He did a lot. He did a lot. He accomplished so many things, bringing new people in, writing songs for other bands, producing artists. I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm a huge fan. That's all I can say. And the
Right.
fact that he wasn't afraid to put out music in any way, like he didn't worry about, oh, is this fit my image? Does this fit my, the
Right.
expectations of the public? That's why he was so great. He took risks all the time. And I think that's why, when I made that comment, when I said, was all of it amazing? No, well, because I think it was his willingness to put himself out there and try and do anything that came to his mind, which I highly respect. I would rather follow an artist that's going to do that than is just going to be so particular about, those types of things. So, yeah.
So Ryan, your band, the Melismatics. First question: what's this name, Melismatic? What does that mean?
Excellent question. I always say that name was like probably the worst decision I ever made because it's hard to pronounce, it's hard to remember. And, if you have a really clever name, a band can go very far on a name alone, and there are some really good examples of that. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to give examples, but I mean, I will say that. Well, here's a band I actually love. I love the Brian Jonestown Massacre, but if you ever have seen their documentary on them and their rivalry with the Dandy Warhols, there was an A&R woman who went to Seymour Stein and said, I want to sign this band and I'm going to go see them tonight and I want you to check them out. And she said, the name of the band is the Brian Jonestown Massacre. And Seymour Stein just said, oh, just sign them. That name is so good. Just sign them. You see my point. I mean, that's a good band actually. But what I mean is, you can go, your branding and your band name means sometimes at least as much as the music. So the Melismatics, we got the name because I was just starting my new band, and I had booked our first show. We had a local magazine here or local paper. It was like our music scene paper called the City Pages, and I needed to tell the venue what the name of the band was by a certain date. I had like a cutoff because I said I booked the show. I'm like, I don't know the band name yet. I'll get back to you. And they said, okay. I got a message saying we need the band name today because it's going to the City Pages today.
Right.
So I was in school. I was taking a test, and I was like, okay, I'm going to just put my pen on some random word, and that'll be the name of the band for this week, and then I'll change it when I think of something better. So.
Right.
Put it down, and it came upon the word melismatic. And I was in a music class, right? So melismatic means when you have multiple notes on a single lyrical syllable. So, if you sing ah and you sing, like oh, or whatever, that's a melisma. So I was like, okay, well, we'll just call it the Melismatics, And I never got around to changing it to a different name. So we kept it. And, that's where the name came from. And I figured, on one hand, nobody else ever thought of that name. Well, there was actually one university that had a choir group that named themselves the Lee University Melismatics. And we had to talk to them about that we own the rights to the name. And, but a lot of band names, if you think of a band name and you go Google it, somewhere in the world, somebody's thought of it already. But that one, no one had at that time. Someone did years later. Like I said, it was a university thing. But so it did have the uniqueness to it, I guess. So that is good. But I think it actually hindered the band because I feel like the name alone was just harder to to spread like wildfire. So
right. So I listened to some of the Melismatic songs. You have this from your album, The Acid Test, and one that I really like is the Soul Sucker from Acid Test, and you also have a cool music video for that, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So what's happening with Melismatics? Because I I didn't see like, are you guys really working on new music for Melismatic? Because I didn't see like, very recent
Right.
releases for them.
Yeah. So the Melismatics, the last full length studio album we made was back in 2013. So that's what is that? 8 years ago? Yes. Um, and that was called Rising Tide. And then
Right.
we put out a single, Celebrate Your Heartbeat, in 2014. And that was about our daughter, Skylar, who was just born. And that obviously changes your life, when you have a kid. And then we put out another single called All in Time. And then through the last, probably since somewhere in 2014, the Melismatics started to slow down. So that band toured a lot. We were on the road a lot. We worked incredibly hard. And I think everybody in the band was getting burnt out and tired from the amount of work we were doing, and maybe just even the approach that we were taking, because we were road dogs. We were playing show after show after show, and the world was changing. And it's like, well, do we need to do this? Do we need to be like in venues, or should we be doing more, more online kinds of things? And we took a step back, and I think everybody needed a break. And then, ultimately what happened is I was writing a lot of songs still. Pony from the Melismatics was also writing a lot of songs. And I had the idea to start a new band. And so therefore we went to the label that we were on, Pravda Records. And I said, well, I got a bunch of new songs. The Melismatics need to kind of chill a bit, and I'll start a new band. And I was going to call it the Cosmic Shakes.
Right.
And then they said, well, why don't you call it Ryan and Pony? Because it's you two. And, people that like the Melismatics will have a reference of like who we are versus just making up some random new band name. And we took their advice and then made Moshi Moshi. That had gotten started before I joined Soul Asylum. So that was a lot of the music was recorded 2015, maybe 16. Then I joined Soul Asylum in 2016. And then that kind of got put on the back burner for a while because I got so busy with that. And then we finally, released the record in 2020.
Right. So Ryan, Pony is also your wife, right?
Yes.
So I saw this Moshi Moshi. It's very, like J-pop Japanese kind of a reference, right? And I also love that song Start Making Sense. I think that's what it's called. So what's happening with Ryan and Pony nowadays?
Well, that record came out during the pandemic, like Hurry Up and Wait did. So in that weird time, I mean, we're still in a pandemic, that's the thing. So when that came out, I mean, in my mind, it's still kind of a new record. I mean, I know it's old in a sense. It's a year old at this point, but it's a year old in pandemic world, which is still new because nobody is, it's just the world has changed a lot. So, so that I've basically been kind of hopping around on project to project. So in my mind, that album still has a lot of life in it, and it's still been getting new reviews and new, like playlists picking it up on Spotify. And so that's still like a relevant record in my mind, like in my humble opinion. And then I've been working on a solo record as well. When the tour ended, I started, or actually going back to the tour that got canceled. Or at the end of it, I started recording demos of songs. I just played all the instruments, and usually that's like my general approach. If I'm working on a song, I'll do a demo where I play all the instruments, and then I just either keep the parts that I'm doing and have people replace their parts, or we just go back and record it fresh, from the ground up. But the solo record, I just was like, well, you know what? I'll keep these as is, and so they'll remain like the demos. And so I put out 2 singles with that. So, when you say, so like the Melismatics, I guess like what I'm trying to say is that maybe as the Melismatics, we haven't made new music recently,
Right,
but in the family of the Melismatics, like I kind of see all of that as like under that umbrella. So if it's
right.
a solo record or if it's a Ryan and Pony record or if it's a Melismatics record, it's all kind of from that lineage. So we did play a show as the Melismatics this summer, and Mark, the bass player, and I always are talking about what's next and what we're going to do, and so nothing is, it's all moving forward. It's all alive and well,
Right, right. So I remember, I mean, at the beginning of this, you mentioned that like you had a like a Fender Square lone guitar, and what what are you using now? Like, what are your gear now? Like, what sort of guitars do you use? How many guitars do you have actually?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know, so I only know this because it was maybe a week or two ago, I had a student ask me how many guitars I own.
Right.
And I said, I don't know. And then she said, well, can you count? And I said, well, I was like, sure. If you want, I will count them. And I did. And so I counted, including bass guitars and everything. I had 21 guitars, which isn't like astounding, but it's, I'm like, oh, that's kind of a lot of guitars. They're in different places. They're not all in one place. Like at Soul Asylum's rehearsal space, I've got a Les Paul and an SG, and I just got a bunch of guitars, and they're all kind of scattered about. But my
Thank you.
go-to, because you're asking like, what do I play? Like the Soul Asylum guitar that I use is a Les Paul, and it is 100% coincidence that I play a gold top, which is what Dan Murphy would play. But the reason I have that is because when I was actually going to Japan, I was talking to Gibson directly about getting a new guitar, and I knew I wanted either a black, white, or a gold top Les Paul, and they said, well, if you want a gold top, we have one sitting right here in our office that we can next day deliver you, and you'll have it before you go to Japan. And I was like,
Right.
well, done deal. That's like fate, serendipity. I'm like, so I'm going to play that. So that's kind of been my main acts there, other than I've got an SG Junior. I like playing that a lot with the humbucker. It's got the P90 and then Reverend Guitars. I don't know if you ever heard of Reverend, but they're
No.
out of Detroit, Michigan. Really, really great guitars. Like Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins has his own signature model. So does Ron Ashton, who died from the Stooges.
Right.
He had his own signature model. They're just killer guitars. So I love those. So I have a number of those, and I got Gibson J45. Anyway, I could babble about guitars. It's probably not the most interesting thing for most people, but
Yeah, but what I want to say is like, there's no such thing as too many guitars.
yeah.
Right. So Ryan, so now that things are sort of kind of getting back to normal, I mean, normal is what, as I said, what we make of it. But
It is.
so,
Yeah.
what are you looking forward to, and all these bands that you're involved, all this your solo stuff. So, what are you looking forward to, and what can we expect in the near future?
Well, I think what I'm really looking forward to is having another very prolific output of music. I love playing shows. Shows are phenomenal ways to connect with people, and I think there will be a lot of shows coming up. But I think that the pandemic has allowed, it has allowed me and other people I work with to stay in more, and that allows you to write more songs, to record more music. So really, that's what I'm looking forward to, is having a high output of material that's good, not just high output, but stuff that I can feel proud of and put a lot of time into it, and be spontaneous. It's like it's a balance, but when it comes to releasing music, I always like to just feel really good about it. Because every day there are over 1,000 songs released into the world, and so I'm like, unless you really feel good about something, you don't need to add to the clutter of songs that are coming out every day. So I want to
Right.
feel really good about it. So that's what I feel people can expect is like new music. And shows, maybe not as many as would have been pre-pandemic, but I think that's okay. There might be more online things, like more ways to connect in that way. Um, a lot more music videos. There's gonna, so more music videos, more releases, some acoustic versions of songs. Um, you know, that's what I'm looking for, the ability to just be able to release music at a more rapid rate and work in the studio more.
Right. So, before the pandemic, Ryan, I like 2017, 18, 19, or before that, I was always going to concerts. Like I would go to like 60 concerts like every year. I would go like sometimes over 60 concerts. But in 2018, 2020, I could go only to eight shows, only just eight. So uh and this live stream stuff, I was quite skeptical at the beginning because I had that live experience, so I was always going backstage and all this. So I was quite skeptical of whether you can really have any enjoyment from live streams. But I started watching some of them, and then there was some artists who did the live streams so good that I really enjoyed it. And then now I'm a big fan of watching the live streams. And this actually gives me a lot of new opportunities. There are artists that I mean, I never thought I would able to see them, like Bob Dylan. And I watched the Pantera. They did like Phil Anselmo did a Pantera sort of a thing with his Illegals, and Behemoth, and so many other amazing artists that I couldn't. Now I'm looking forward to all the live streams. I watch them because I would the time zones kind of match because it's 8 p.m. in the US. It's like 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. for me, so it works. So I'm really looking forward to these live streams, and I hope that even the regular shows moving forward, maybe they can incorporate some sort of a live stream element to that so that other people can really enjoy it, right?
Yeah, I agree. I right there with you. I mean, there's a new appreciation for things, and live shows can never be replaced, but these live streams are fascinating, and they're it's a new opportunity. Like you said, you can see people that you wouldn't have ever been able to see. So it's
Right.
just like there's just more. There are now more options, and I think it's just good to look at the bright side of things that are challenging and difficult, because there's so many sad things and tragic things have happened. But you know if you can get beyond that and look at, well, now there's a way to connect with people in ways we could have but didn't before. That's a really good thing. There's a lot of forward motion that I think is making the world a better place, I hope.
Right, right. So Ryan, what's your message to the viewers of this video and listeners of this podcast?
What's my message?
Yeah.
Have a good time all the time. That's a Spinal Tap quote.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't have a message. I try not to be too, I mean, I don't want to, I don't know. Um, love one another, there you go. Be nice. Be nice. The world has become a very, well, it's become a very challenging place to exist. And it's good when people are kind and people listen
Right.
and those types of things, I guess. That's my message. More of that.
Yeah. And then grateful for the moment, right? I mean,
Yes, totally be grateful for the moment. Yeah.
mhm. So Ryan, anybody you want to shout out to?
Um, You know, I'll say this. I'll say shout out to all my students because I teach a lot of people online. That's been a really, really cool innovation with the pandemic is that my students are located all over the place, like in different countries, in different states around the United States, different cities, and uh, and it's really fun. I get to work with people on a weekly basis and see them develop and be a part of their um, musical experience. So I'll say shout out to all my students if anybody's watching that happens to be one of them.
Right. So yeah, I want to shout out to Andy Gallagher of Overhaul for connecting us together.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm going to second that notion because yes, shout out to Andy because very cool. Yeah, I'm really glad that he connected us and made this happen.
Right. So Ryan, such a pleasure to have you, and I really enjoyed this conversation with you. And
Likewise.
I really want to like go back and listen to your Melismatic and Ryan and Pony and your solo stuff. I need to go and like listen to them more, and I hope we can connect through online, and I'll give you my my sense of what I like about your songs and stuff like that, and then we can communicate on that. So looking forward to all your new songs, and hopefully someday we will be able to see you with Soul Asylum and Melismatics.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe we'll be. You said you're in the Philippines, right?
Right.
Who knows? Maybe we'll be there. I don't know. We are talking about getting back in, doing some more international dates loosely. We'll see what happens. So
Right.
that'd be
And I think
amazing.
there will be a big appetite for live shows here because people have we just started just going out of the houses now, right? So I think next couple of years people will go to all the live shows they can because they're so waiting for it.
Totally.
So,
Yeah.
so Ryan, tell everybody how they can follow you, and also if they want to get lessons from you, how they can contact
Yeah.
you and all that.
Well, if you want to follow the Melismatics, you can go to themelismatics.com, or is it melismatics.com? I don't know. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on all of the usual usual suspects. Ryan and Pony, you can go to ryanandpony.com. We're on all usual social media as well. If you want to order music, go to Pravda. I always forget their website. The record label that we're on, I believe, is pravdamusic.com. And you can get music there. It's on Spotify. That's anywhere. My solo music is also on Spotify. If you just search there, Apple Music. I've got a Facebook page. That's kind of a developing project. So there'll be an official website. And there is like I said, a Facebook page, but it'll have the other mediums coming soon. Soul Asylum, soulasylum.com. Facebook, Twitter, all that jazz, Instagram. So you can, just follow, friend, like all those things. Join all of them. They're all different, so you get different things from the different sources.
Right. So Ryan, thanks for joining the podcast. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Channa. This is a blast. Thanks for
Thank
it.
you.